Good morning. I'd like to call to order the April 27, 2026 special meeting of the Big Bear Area Regional Wastewater Agency at 9 a.m. I'd please ask everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will ask Director Sauer to lead us.
Pledge our allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, could I have a motion and a second to approve our agenda?
Make a motion.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Director Sauer,
Aye.
Chair Segovia,
Aye.
Director Russo,
Aye.
and Vice Chair Walsh.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to public forum. Pursuant to Government Code 54934.3A, public comment at a special meeting is limited to items listed on the posted agenda. Each speaker is allotted a maximum of 3 minutes to address the governing board. Public comment will be taken during consideration of item number 5. Okay, moving on to new business.
I have public here.
Dan, we're gonna take the public comment, item number 5.
Oh, you just said something about it.
Yeah. Which is, we're just now moving into item number 5. Okay, moving on to new business, discussion action items. Replenish Big Bear presentation, current scope and financial impacts, green spot recharge alternative, potential grant impacts, and questions for the board. David.
All right, well. Closer. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here today. I wanted to talk to you today about options moving forward for the Replenish Big Bear project. And an alternative that makes sense every perspective. There we go. So in the survey, the board said yes, that groundwater recharge is important to the Big Bear Valley. You also said yes, I would like to review alternative scopes of work and discharge locations. I think we can all agree that cost is important to all of us involved in this project. I think we also agree that doing a project that is cost effective is the best option for everyone going forward. So I want to walk away today from this discussion is having the board support on moving forward with the green spot alternative. I think we can do that, and I'm gonna turn this over to Delane now. And pass her over. I said, maybe not. Right.
My name's Lane Carlson with WSC, program manager for Replenish Big Bear. So the purpose and agenda today, we're going to review the current Replenish Big Bear scope and financial impacts. Most of this you've already seen in some minor activities. And then we'll delve into what a green spot recharge alternative could look like, including the costs and how that might be implemented. And then we'll talk about grant impacts, if the board does decide to make a scope shift, how that impact the funding that's available. And then finally, we have some specific questions for the board seeking direction for next steps. We're not planning to cover today a few topics that we've discussed in prior Replenish Big Bear discussions, because we really don't have new information on those items. And these are things that we'll discuss again in the future. But outfall buying repairs or replacements, changing regulatory requirements, funding and financing plan, and then updated financial impacts of stopping or pausing PDR. We talked about all of those things, I believe, about the 7th of December meeting. Yeah, and there really isn't new information to discuss at this point. So if you have specific questions on those items, feel free to see that, and you can probably bring back additional information at future workshops. So really the key, decision flow path that we're considering, there are quite a few efforts ahead of BARWA and the staff. And we want to really make sure that we are approaching these in the most efficient way possible and making effective use of the amount of these things. So having a clear direction on Replenish Big Bear, whatever that is really going to be foundational so that we can approach the master plans with clarity and figure out, for the long-term development of this site here, what is going to be the most efficient way to make the improvements that are needed into the future. And then that all leads into budget and rates, which you all need clarity on in order to make your decisions. And so we're really optimistic that we can get to a point of clarity on our Replenish Big Bear, hopefully today, so that we can move into those other efforts smoothly. So just to recap, we will go pretty quickly through this section, but the current Replenish Big Bear scope of work, as you know, is to produce here at the BARWA site up to 2,200 acre-feet a year of new purified water source. And all of that water would travel through the orange pipeline shown on this map, be discharged to Stanfield Marsh, which can then also flow into Big Bear Lake. From there, that program water could be extracted from the lake, conveyed up to Sand Canyon for direct groundwater recharge, and also be used by the golf course instead of groundwater as a groundwater offset. So in the current scope of work, that's the mechanism to achieve the 500 acre-feet of groundwater recharge is direct at Sand Canyon and then groundwater offset through certain golf course. And it's kind of a two-step. It's the discharge, and then separate from that is the groundwater recharge operation. And so that's a key distinction that we'll see that's very different with the green spot alternative. So I want to highlight that. These next couple of slides really are just for your reference. Feel free to ask any questions that you might have. These are updates of information that was presented in at the December meeting. So project expenditures through the end of February, and then also fund sources through the end of February. And I don't think I said this at the beginning, but feel free to stop me at any point if you have questions. We can answer those as we go along. Christine and David can chime in as well. Okay, so Matt is going to do a recap of the October 2025 cost estimate that he presented as a result of the PDR.
Hello, everybody. Matt Rodriguez, design manager for Replenish Big Bear. So as with the slides that Lane just presented, this will be a recap of what we presented the October and December meetings. Basically, cost estimate for the current Replenish Big Bear. Sorry, guys. The basic cost estimate for the prior estimate and current scope for Replenish Big Bear, Lane just covered on that prior slide, that graphic. This will be helpful for comparison to the green spot estimate present later in the presentation. So it's a class 3 estimate, which class 3 meaning the project definition is about preliminary design at 25%. Our accuracy range was -15 to 20%, -15 to plus 20%. And those are our cost sources that we use, which are pretty much similar with what we have for green spot. Equipment, tools from equipment manufacturers, some contractor outreach, unit quantity takeoffs, where we actually measure specific quantities within our design, and compare those to unit costs. And then lastly, engineering judgment based on recent project bids, emphasized at Big Bear. And dollar basis for that estimate was November 2025. And then as you may recall, we talked about how that cost estimate did not yet include any VAVA or tariffs in the estimate. There's ways we can deal with that, talk about that, but cover that in the prior presentations as well. So the project capital costs had a construction subtotal of $63,877,000, with some markups landed around 76.5 million. And then, sorry, looking at you were cut off there a little bit, but Total project cost with construction contingency and implementation cost was 105,000,000. For the annual O&M costs, got some of what was factored into that, chemical deliveries, equipment replacements, energy, labor, some administrative activities, compliance activities. We were assuming 12 months of operation. As you recall, the current scope was going to be operated about 11 months for a shutdown period for some maintenance. O&M is on a 20-year basis, similar with the green spot estimate. And that annual O&M cost was 4.3 million and a FTE full-time equivalent labor increase of 6.15. So next, I'll hand it over to Christine to cover some of the data facts.
Thank you, Matt. So based on the RBB construction estimate of 105 million and taking into account the current 10-year capital improvement plan, it is anticipated that rates would increase to just under $884 over the 10-year period. Keep in mind that once the master plans are completed, this number could increase if the plans identify additional capital improvement projects that need to be completed within the 10-year period. For comparison, we are also showing estimated rates if RBB does not go to construction. The orange line on the graph is assuming grant repayments with rates estimated to increase to just over $517 over the 10-year period. And the green line is assuming no grant repayments with estimated rates staying flat over the same period. Both rate comparisons include the additional capital improvement projects that were originally included in RBB, but will still need to be constructed if RBB is not. If the agency is required to repay grants, the agency would need to enter into debt for the additional capital improvement projects, which is reflected in the orange line on the graph. Debt service coverage is essentially the agency's income to debt ratio, using net income before depreciation and current and future debt. Lenders look for as much debt service coverage as possible, but also understand the balance between future rate increases, targeted debt service coverage, and affordability of rates. A debt service coverage over the covenant level gives the agency a buffer should new appropriations be needed during the fiscal year. Per NHA advisors, while the covenant level set by the agency's current loan is 1.2 times, given the size of the RBB debt, a target level of no less than 1.6 times is advised. At this ratio, the agency would be better positioned when negotiating loan terms for future loans. Also, the preliminary S&P rating was based on a forecast that had a minimum debt service of 1.65 times. Therefore, a lower coverage ratio could result in lower final rating. The S&P rating is required prior to finalizing the Lithia loan. Based on the current RBB construction estimate of 105 million, and assuming the EPA would increase the approved Lithia loan amount to the federal maximum and increasing additional funding needed, the agency's debt capacity would be negatively impacted. The agency has historically targeted a 1.7 times debt service coverage, as evidenced by the yellow line. As you can see, the agency would fall below this target level in fiscal year 2030 and 31, and be fairly flat in fiscal year 32. The green line on the graph is the suggested 1.6 times debt service. Based on the suggested debt service coverage ratio, the agency would fall below that target level in fiscal year 2030. So why does this matter? Well, this matters because the debt service coverage determines the agency's borrowing capacity. The blue line on the graph takes into consideration the agency's target debt service coverage of 1.7 times. As you can see, when the agency falls below the target level, agency essentially has no borrowing capacity in fiscal year 2030 to 2032. The orange line on the graph is the suggested 1.6 times debt service coverage. Based on this, the suggested minimum debt service coverage, the agency would have no borrowing capacity in fiscal year 2030. When considering either debt service coverage ratio, the agency's borrow capacity would be limited until the debt service coverage ratio increases over the 10-year period. So does this mean the agency can't borrow in an emergency? Not necessarily. However, it may be difficult to find a lender that would enter into a loan, and if a lender is willing, the loan terms would likely not be favorable. Again, if the master plans identify additional capital improvement projects that need to be completed within the 10-year period, future rates would increase to support additional funding for such projects, whether it be through PAYGO or debt service. And then I'll hand it back to Nate.
The next section. Next section is on alternative option. So over the last 20 plus years, Barwa has looked at recycled water alternatives on multiple occasions, and in the 2004-2005 timeframe actually advanced pretty far towards implementing a green spot recharge alternative. Other options that have been looked at were Van Dusen recharge, irrigation, I think construction water also was one of them. And then most recently in 2018, what became known as Replenish Big Bear was a combination of lake discharge, sand canyon recharge, and then shade pond discharge. So over the course of the last 20 years, the potential program has been repackaged multiple times, and there's been a lot of different alternatives considered. And I think all of these things are still on the table, and they're all still viable options. Specifically focusing on the groundwater recharge benefit, which has always been really the fundamental driver for this program. Recharge at Sand Canyon, Green Spot, and Van Dusen in those previous studies back in 2004, 2005 were all identified as potentially viable recharge sites. Some have different recharge rates. Green Spot in particular, we have a lot more information about it because it was the selected program back in 2005, a lot more studies were done. But all of these things are viable to implement in the short term or in the long term. So we're going to focus on the groundwater recharge by Green Spot alternative. So in the 2016 Bear Valley Water Sustainability Study, which was really what kicked off this Replenish Big Bear program, we did look at groundwater recharge at Green Spot. And at that time, we were focusing on a yield of 1,000 acre-feet per year. In the 2005 studies, it was about the maximum that could be recharged in that area without, causing groundwater levels to come too high, which presents some risks. And so that was, the maximum at that time. So that's what we looked at. It would require a new 12-inch pipe from the Barwa facility over to that site, about 15,000 feet of pipe. And we had assumed at that time that we would need to put in 6 new production wells to be able to extract the water. So it's really a managed recharge. You're putting it in, you're taking it out, and you're able to manage water levels. So they're really stable. There are also several existing CST and DWP wells in this area that would continue to be used. Could continue to be used and would also help manage groundwater levels. And so what we're looking at now is a modified alternative for Green Spot. We're looking at a lower yield, 500 acres. And the reason for that is because, like I was mentioning before, 1,000 is really the maximum. And there could be times where, during wetter periods, we're getting a lot of rainfall, but that basin couldn't take 1,000 acre feet. And so 500 acre feet is a lower amount that would provide the same amount of groundwater recharge benefit for current replenishment per scope, 500 acre feet. And we anticipate that it would be easier to manage in that basin, and then you would be able to recharge more often, just by not kind of overloading the basin during certain times. It'd be a more reliable and consistent operation. The size of the pipeline could be reduced to 8-inch instead of 12. So there's some cost savings available there. And again, because of the lower amount, those existing wells, this does need to be confirmed by additional modeling by the hydrogeologist, but the existing CST and DWP wells in that area, we believe could be used to manage basin levels without installing the 6 new wells that were in the previous scope. So again, significant cost savings by not having to put in 6 new wells and really leveraging that existing infrastructure. The studies that were done in 2005 indicated that groundwater levels could be stable with those existing wells. And again, that's something that we really think is still feasible, but some updated hydrogeological analysis that we needed. So comparing the original to the modified, we're, reducing the capacity by half. And so the recharge site size, similarly would be reduced by half. I think in the cost estimate, we actually assumed 5 acres. Is that right, Matt? Yeah, so this slide's not updated. So we assumed 5 acres to be conservative. Again, same pipeline route, just smaller size. Reduce the new wells, or actually eliminate the new wells. And then it's covered up here on this slide, but you would still need 2 new monitoring wells, and that's to meet the regulatory requirements to make sure that the groundwater quality is maintained. Those 2 monitoring wells would be required regardless. There is also, I think it's in the footnote of this slide. There is also a CSD pipeline in that area. It was installed I think in the 90s and is unused. It's about 4,600 feet and it travels along part of that alignment. So it's possible that if that pipeline is still in good condition, that you could use that pipeline and then reduce, instead of the 15,000, you could use this 4,600 feet of existing pipe for a portion of it. So if that pipeline is still in good condition, which we don't know as of today, it hasn't been inspected, that could further reduce the cost and just leverage some existing facilities a little bit more. The original site that the green spot recharge alternative was proposed on is on state land here and happens to currently be for sale. Has been set, so 20-acre parcel has been subdivided now, I believe. And I think that the benefit of continuing to consider this as the potential green spot site as that goes forward is that back in that 2004-2005 timeframe, a lot of evaluation was done at this specific site. They did a pilot recharge program where they actually built a small recharge pond. They put potable water in just to test recharge rates. And so it really has been pretty well validated what it would look like and how it would work to recharge at that location. And, hydrogeology can be tricky. So if you were to even move, a few parcels to the south, it could be different. And so I think a different site would present some new challenges. If the site were not available, certainly there could be other locations that could work. It just would require new investigations to confirm that. And the validity and viability of recharge at this site has already been confirmed through actual on-site testing. So that's a real benefit to reduce risk of how that operation would work. All right, now it's going to talk a little bit about the water quality and treat the differences between the current scope and this green spot alternative.
Yeah, so water quality along with the reduced capacity of green spot are the 2 big drivers for reduced costs for this alternative. So this is a comparison slide showing top row, the lake discharge water quality requirements. And then on that bottom row, the green spot recharge water quality requirements. These are defined by regulators through the Santa Ana Regional Water Quality Control Board's basin plan. So it's the same document, same process, both aimed at protecting the uses of the water, or in this case, the groundwater basin. So those are reflective on the bottom of protecting drinking water uses for the groundwater basin in this valley. So the most notable ones are actually the TIN and the TP. So the total inorganic nitrogen, total phosphorus. You see those have dropped away. First, we had very stringent limits for the lake discharge. As a reminder, those TIN and TP collectively are the most stringent in the nation there would be. And going back to the left side of the table there, TDS and hardness are both increased in the green spot recharge alternative. Again, just the lake discharge varies more stringent water quality requirements. for that body of water. Sulfate increases from 10 to 20, which I know doesn't seem like a lot, but for an RO system, it is. So that helps out a little bit as well. And then we do get a nitrate limit for green spot recharge, and that is actually not that big of an impact with the current system with the RO downstream. We're glad to meet that. So nutrients become really not a problem at all. It's pretty straightforward to meet those with an RO system, advanced water purification facility like we have for these two alternatives. So those, along with the reduced capacity of the green spot with only 5 million feet per year, those are the leading contributors to a savings in cost. So on the next slide, we show graphically that process flow diagram of the lake discharge alternative, is what changes. So again, the biggest change to highlight here first is that brine immunization piece at the bottom. Because we have less we're producing, we are able to manage within the footprint of this plant with an upsized enhanced evaporation facility, that extra brine that we would get. So it's lower capacity, but because we're lower recovery, we're above 99% for this system that is shown. For the lake alternative, we would be targeting 90% through a high recovery RO process instead. So less capacity, but lower recovery. We actually have more brine to deal with, but we manage that with that upsized enhanced evaporation system. So those are big contributors to saving the building footprint, the treatment process, and you'll see in the O&M later a significant chemical cost savings as well as energy. And on the top right there, you see when we have product water stabilization, which was carbon dioxide and lime. So as water goes through an RO system, it gets corrosive, quite aggressive, low pH. We add the lime to add alkalinity and increase the pH. We don't need that CO2 because we don't need as much lime to add, so you don't need to kind of balance out the higher pH of the lime. So it's one less chemical facility and treatment process. And then on that top right there, the ammonia removal, as noted through the reduced or less stringent nutrient requirements, we don't need to scrub out to nearly zero ammonia. So we would get rid of that chemical use and that chemical dosing process as well. So I'm going to kick it back to Lane here for some of the further details on green spot, and she'll go back to me on presenting thoughts.
So this slide you'll recognize from some previous Replenish Big Bear presentations, and we're using it again here because it's really the same benefit for green spot as it was for Sand Canyon and the golf course, but 500 acre-feet per year of groundwater recharge. And so what that means, just in terms of long-term groundwater sustainability in the valley, you'll see on this graph the purple is projected groundwater pumping. And at the end, it kind of flares out because, you know, out in 2070, there's some uncertainty, right, of how much water people are using and how much growth will occur between now and then. So there's kind of a range there at the end. And then the dark black line shows what the sea field of the groundwater basin would be, sort of with and without Replenish Big Bear. So without Replenish Big Bear, it actually would follow the bottom of the kind of green color there. I should put this in 2 slides. And you'll see towards the end, this 2070 time frame, the pumping in the sea field, it doesn't cross, right? It doesn't indicate a shortage of supply, but it gets close, and there is still a lot of uncertainty out that far. Climate change models provided by the state predict a long-term decline in groundwater sustainable yield. And this was evaluated through the groundwater sustainability plan that's done in the Big Bear Valley. And so what this 500 acre-feet per year does is it, you know, once the project comes online, it bumps that line up by 500 acre-feet. And so it gets you an additional buffer long-term for groundwater supply and demand. You know, again, the actual pumping, there's kind of a range there, and there are certainly things that could be done to limit pumping in the valley. I think notably, the water use efficiency out here is already very, very good relative to other parts of the state. There is not a lot of outdoor landscaping, which is where Most communities, some communities use 70% of their water out. That just isn't the case here. And so there already has been a lot that's been done in terms of water conservation. And so there's not a whole lot left to do to reduce demands. And so increasing supplies is where this program can help create that buffer in the long term. And then some really key implementation considerations for this alternative that are different from the current replenished repair scope is that in this case, green spot recharge could be a complete effluent discharge system for Barwa. It's similar to the way that the Barwa Lucerne Valley discharge works, right? So you're treating the water here at the plant, conveying it to the discharge site. Lucerne Valley has some irrigation uses, and then the rest goes into a pond there, right? And all of that is owned and operated by Barwa under Barwa's permit. These could be similar. So Barwa could, in this case, because it's an all-in-one discharge location, construct the pipeline to green spot, the recharge basin, the monitoring wells, that would all be part of Barwa's permit. And so it could all be constructed together. And I was highlighting this earlier, the existing scope, because, the existing scope, Barwa's discharge point is the marsh. That's really where Barwa's responsibility stops. And for that reason, the Sand Canyon recharge aspect was kind of separate. And it would have to be implemented by the water agencies to achieve that water supply benefit. And I know that's been a source of concern that we've heard is that, that there's, an additional cost and a separate project and a separate permit that would have to, that would be required in order to a full Replenish Repair program to get those groundwater recharge benefits. And in this case, that could be simplified because it's really just a direct discharge. And that's, I think, something that at the point where we are, I think that provides some benefits. It provides more kind of simplicity, more certainty for Barwa in implementing this project, and more certainty for the ratepayers in receiving the groundwater recharge benefit. And so CST and DWP would not have to implement a separate project. They could get the groundwater recharge benefits through the use of their existing wells in the area. They wouldn't have to take separate actions, construct separate facilities to receive the benefits. And so I think that simplicity reduces some uncertainty and certainly some complexity. Barwa would then hold the groundwater recharge permit. That would be the discharge permit. No other agencies would have to hold the permits or do the sampling. I think there would need to be coordination between DWP, CSD, and Barwa or the operation. We'd be managing water levels, we'd be taking water quality samples. And so that would all be coordinated, but ultimately all of the compliance responsibility and all of the operational responsibility for that recharge basin would be Barwa's. And you'd have complete control over compliance with respect to your permit. So that's the benefit as well. There's, with the lake discharge, we've talked about an adaptive management program because there is some uncertainty around what the conditions would be once the discharge begins there. And so, working closely with MWD, the existing scope might require some adaptation over time. This one is much more straightforward. The regulations are much more well-defined, and there isn't that sort of external uncertainty where, blending it with another water source. So in that way, it reduces the complexity of the risk as well. And so I think we would, for the purposes of grants, as we'll talk about next, we would basically call this the Replenish Repair Phase 1. And so it would be 500 acre feet. It's not nearly all the water that's available. And so in the future, additional phases could be implemented if that was something that the Barwa Board and the was interested in doing. You could add on recharge at Van Dusen or something, and you could add back in the lake discharge. All of those things could still be on the table long term. I think this one would provide sort of a proof of concept, a small initial step that's feels implementable, and then still keep your options open for the future. Right, and that's gonna tell you the cost.
Yeah, so drawing to the comparison from the prior slide, I've got the lake alternative cost refresher on. This is instead of class 3, it's a class 4, so instead of a project definition, 25% to 15%. Accuracy range is slightly wider instead of the +20, we're at +25. Otherwise, the low end range is the same. Just as a reminder, AAC and E International is our water wastewater industry standard for cost estimating and classification systems. So I'm happy to answer any questions if someone wants more detail on that. It's just how we define kind of project definition and accuracy range for where we're at, but the detail project or an alternative. Similar to the lake alternative, the green spot cost sources are the same. Going back to equipment vendors, update largely the same process with some, some of those subtractions from the process flow diagram that I previously showed. We did update the dollar basis to March 2026. And same as the lake alternative, BABA and tariffs are not factored into this estimate. We wanted to clarify that the process building that we established the footprint for the 500 acre feet per year is not sized to accommodate a build out. So this cost I'm going to show you is the building required to get the 500 acre feet per year capacity production. We're not saving space to add another RO train or something else to help produce more water. So we did talk about wanting to scale this up in the future. The process building would increase the cost of the footprint. So we're just sizing it for what we need for this 500 acre agreement. Delaying on the next slide.
Question on this before we move on.
Yeah.
So the accuracy range, I had previously assumed that that was a cost accuracy range.
It is.
It is.
Correct.
Okay, so there's no other definition.
No, it's just the number we show you.
Okay.
Yeah, -15.
I want to make sure I was understanding. Okay.
And as you get further in design, that range narrows because you're more certain.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and apologies folks, we've got, I think maybe that's some font version issues or something between the files here, so those numbers should be there for subtotal and construction cost subtotal. I noticed the table issue on one of the other slides, so we'll make sure we provide that description. If you did want to fill that in, that subtotal should be 48,565,000. And the construction cost subtotal should be 59,756,000. Right, that. So what we've got broken down on the top is basically the big chunks of the process or the design broken down by different categories there to show the breakdown. Obviously, a majority being treatment. And then the other notable increase is the evaporation pond. As you recall, we have to have more of that enhanced evaporation structure. So instead of around $1 billion for that process, for that equipment, it's more towards 5 million. So that's the big change on that evaporation pond cost in the lake alternative. Effluent pump station and pipeline, obviously reducing capacity and pipeline length, so those can be done as well. And then we had the green spot recharge basin and this one, that I mentioned. So all in, after construction contingency on the bottom, the land acquisition of $1 million, the implementation costs, we're at 88.6 million. And the implementation costs are reflective of where we are today and what we've spent versus what additional costs would be incurred to switch to a green spot alternative. So I just want to make that clear. The lake alternative has a lower implementation cost, but obviously if we pivot, there's time and cost scheduling factors from that. So we did want to make sure we reflected that there. So that number did come up.
Just a question regarding that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's substantial for a smaller project with less pipeline. Can you explain that a little bit better?
Yeah, as far as like the percentage of implementation cost to total
I
project
mean,
cost.
it's, like I said, it's much higher percentage of the total cost than existing. I just need to understand a little bit better. This doesn't make sense to me.
Correct. Yeah, relative is a higher percentage. If you were to have started a project for Green Spot moving forward, blank slate, and look at that number, that implementation cost would be much lower. I mean, a lot of that has occurred from us moving from the original scope of the project to where we are now. One being like the regulatory coordination, for instance. I can't recall how much expense paid on that, but that's part of the implementation cost. the lake alternative fits in a lot of gray area for the regulatory piece. And we have a lot of workshops and a lot of back and forth, some lake analysis. If you go to green spots from the start, that looks much lower because those regulations are being codified. You already know what the regulators need and want. You know what type of engineering report you have to produce. So I think the difference you're seeing is because we're so far along in the current scope and up to the PDR level. And a lot of that is the incurred cost for that alternative.
Okay, so regulations is one of the components. What are all the components that make up that?
We've got. Just read it. So implementation is going to include the planning phase, which can include legal, environmental, regulatory. You have design, you have the program management piece, which Lane's leading, construction management, engineering services during construction, and then financial costs as well, which I think the number we had is more dealing with the funding agencies.
Funding,
Yeah. But those are the main components that.
Yeah.
David got into that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's higher, this 18 million is a high number. Because it includes money that we were spent going the other direction. That's why it's so high. We didn't want it to reflect,
It seems a little misleading.
it's hard to, like, we
It's
didn't want,
cash already spent.
we didn't,
I
yeah,
thought the program, the cash is already spent. So I don't think that should be included.
Well-
It's misleading, to be quite honest with you. It looks like that's a hard cost going in, and it's actually money that's already been spent that we're not gonna get back regardless, correct?
well, some of it's already been returned through the, through the grant process, through, we've already been returned some of it through the grants. But the reason we wanted to give you an all-in cost to actually pivot in a different direction. This is your all-in cost to pivot in a different direction. I know it looks, obviously it looks a little funny, but that's really just because of what it cost us already to go, with the original scope of work that we had for the Replenish Big Bear project. So as we start when we pivot to this direction, hopefully, this includes that cost already. I didn't want to present a number that was less than what you've already spent. That makes sense. I know it looks a little funny, but that's
Spend money though.
I know,
We
it's
spent.
spent money, yeah, agreed, 100%, like, what are we around, we're around 7 million so far spent money. Just to kind of give you an idea why that, if you, this is what it's gonna cost Barwa total to go this direction.
I understand. I
Yeah.
disagree with how you're
Yeah.
laying it out, how to be presented to the public. That
Yeah.
looks like that is hard cost moving forward. As opposed to money that's already passed under the bridge. It's just misleading.
We
For the
could,
public. The
Yes,
engineer
but-
can understand.
yeah,
You guys, I totally
Yeah.
get it, but for the public, they will not get it.
yeah, and maybe if you'd like, if the board would like, we can revise this cost estimate to include. The prior implementation costs and then the new.
Be on a totally separate line, maybe even a separate page.
Sure.
It should be explained.
Yeah, I mean, I see Rick's point.
Yeah.
Because really, I mean, if the alternative is if we do nothing, that's just
We're still out $7 million.
money down the drain.
And
So,
you have to make that very clear as well.
Yeah.
Very clear.
Yes,
This is already money that's already been spent.
Yeah.
And the other part of it that I need to understand, it had to do with implementation, but now it's clear why that number is so high. Is that in there? Obviously, we learned something by the initial implementation of what the plant could look like here, what we need to get to that particular stage by the tests we already did, right?
that's correct.
Correct, I was gonna add that, so implementation.
So is that any of that implementation money like repeated?
No, well,
Okay,
some of it is, we can get into the nuance of that, but for instance, to your point, and that's what I was gonna add, David's explanation of it well is. Yeah, there's parts of the design, parts of the PDR, parts of the pilot. That gave us a lot of valuable answers. We don't need to go redo that. So that's why it's also hard to. Tease that apart a little bit, because there's a chunk of the implementation process that. Benefit the green spot alternative that we don't have to green spin. And we can just before.
Great.
For instance, we have a small cost of that is update the PER to reflect the green skull alternative. But we can leverage a lot of the design and piloting some of the regulatory stuff, to the new alternative.
But from policymakers' point of view, we need to know what the cost is and what the future rate changes might be, not what an engineer says. We're concerned about that, if you understand what I'm saying. We're concerned about the perception of the public.
Yes, sir.
So we've got to be very clear with this, and we can't start, I'll say, mixing apples and oranges in order to, engineering wise, make it look right. We have to make sure that policymakers understand when we make decisions, why we're making this decision. As opposed to, looks like, wow, that's pretty expensive, let's not do it. We're missing the mark as policy.
Yeah, and I totally understand, and that it's well received, because it was one of those ones that we had to make a decision on how to present that. And we were looking at it as, well, what's the total cost of this project for the general public, period, as opposed to just to pivot to this direction.
And you gotta make it clear, the total cost, you get zero if you don't move forward, zero.
Zero. And there's
And
zero benefit if we
you're
don't
gonna
move
have to
forward.
charge X amount of rates in the future because we got zero out of it.
That's correct. And so, it was a decision-making time at that point when we're presenting, when we're making the presentation. And obviously, based on the board's input, I would say that we could have chosen differently on a different slide showing that cost. But this is how we chose to show it, so we'll make sure that it reflects better for the public to understand it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. And yeah, for those looking at the screen, 18.9 million was the implementation cost. That's that last white row you can't see, and then the total project cost is 88,598,000. For those that can't see. So on the next slide, I believe we got it going in. So it's similar to like alternative. All the same components, energy, chemical deliveries, equipment replacements, labor, permitting, monitoring for compliance activities for the discharge permit. And then we've got an assumption there for 9 months of operation. So Wayne spoke to a little bit ago about what that basin would take in a wet versus dry year. The original scope of the green spot alternative was a 9-month recharge schedule. So the wet months would not be charged big. More likely to be at capacity than it would take for recharge there. But we did add a 1-month period for seasonal startup and shutdown to be a little bit more conservative. So it's a 10-month per year O&M assumption compared to the 11-month for the lake alternative. And that extra 1 month is just that range processes to full processes, and you take them offline and bring it back online. There's a little bit extra work there. It's not just a matter of equipment. And at a 20-year basis, we're going down from 4.3 million to 1.8 million on O&M costs. Again, a lot of that's a result of the reduced capacity. There's moving less water, treating less water, but a lot of that is also the chemicals with the advantage of this green small alternative, both operationally, particularly operators, and then also just how much we deliver to the mountain. And then the full-time equivalent labor increase, it was 6.15, or it was down to 4.8. And that includes operations, maintenance, and admin staff and that. So if we look at a comparison of the current, the potential modified scope, current scope in that middle column there being the lake alternative, we have a total purified water use number of 1950 acre-feet per year with that water supply benefit of 500 same spot. And as you recall, that total capital cost being 105 and an annual O&M of 4.3. Those are in 2025 dollars. Make a correction on the right side there, the green spot is in $26 per bag. A couple slides ago. So that's 500 acre-feet per year produced, every drop of that going to beneficial use for the recharge. And 88.6 million and 1.8 million capital O&M respectively, again, March $26. Any cost question before we move on to the grant impacts of things in then?
Go ahead.
Could you go back to you compared 10-month and 11-month? If I heard correctly, 10-month for Sand Canyon, 11-month for Green Spot, or did I get that backwards?
The lake alternative was 11 month. That was primarily because of that line dosing system. You have to take it off once a year to clean the pipes, line, scale the pipes line. So Green Spot, we do have line, but it's just for the tail end of the treatment process. But the shutdown period is more for groundwater management, not for operational duties. So it's a 9-month recharge schedule, but we're keeping an extra month to do online and offline activities for the treatment process. So lake alternative was 11 month, Green Spot through the revised alternative is 10 months operation.
Just to clarify, you could, if groundwater conditions presented itself to allow for more recharge, we could, aside from the turn down period that we do need to fix for the scaling purposes, we could operate it longer if the groundwater reflected the, what we need to do. It passed through that way we're not affecting the groundwater or not having to put additional extraction wells in or any of those kind of things. Just to clarify, we could potentially use it longer depending on groundwater conditions.
What I'm also thinking about though is it's a snowmaking line to go to Sand Canyon, and how many months of the year is it not available because it's making snow?
So you're specifically referring to Sand Canyon.
Well, I'm
Right.
when you talk
Right,
10-month,
comparing.
11-month.
The Sand Canyon actual recharge apportionment was, I think it was considered, I think it was like a 6-month period,
6 or 7.
6 or 7 month period. For recharge, because during the winter, you cannot recharge it, you can't mix runoff from the ski resorts and runoff from the mountains with this water, because there's no way you'd probably the mutual would probably get upset because you were trying to mix the two and they can't figure out which water you're actually trying to recharge.
The stigma of toilet to tap.
No, more like whose water is owned. Whose water is in the creek bed as opposed to.
But if you need to flush the line, it's got to be done during the non-snowmaking 6 months.
The Sand Canyon line doesn't need flushing. The Sand Canyon line is just the snowmaking line. It doesn't need flushing. It doesn't have the same issues that the plant itself would have with the line, right? So that's a separate line that goes up to Sand Canyon. It's a whole separate animal when it comes to this. The only restriction on that would really be of the capacity of Sand Canyon and not the capacity of the plant itself. The plant itself has a capacity issues when you go into the lake, because we have to descale the process. Where when we go over to Green Spot doesn't have any restrictions on how much water we can put in there, except for the lake, for the groundwater table levels, percolation levels. That's the big restriction. The other part is obviously, we do have to take it down for scaling issues, but because we're processing such smaller amount, we would probably, the takedown period would be less.
And when you say scaling, you don't mean scaling, you mean.
No, I mean line scaling, like you see in your, on your windows and that kind of stuff, because of the hard water, it's similar kind of scaling issues that you have to deal with through this evaporation process.
I just want to clarify, the line scaling is within the confines of the plant, that's not within the discharge pipeline. So we're just talking about the chemical dosing lines.
But it takes it out of operation.
It does,
Yeah.
All right, any other questions?
That's operation.
Larry has something else he wants to ask.
On the page where you had total dissolved solids, nitrate and all that. Were there,
Slide 54.
the fact that green spot was almost double Sand Canyon or lake discharge. Why?
The basin plan, designates that for the lake, so it's not. What you're looking at there is not necessarily, it's not a Sand Canyon versus spot recharge location, it's Big Bear Lake versus the groundwater basin, so they carry different
It's
regulatory requirements.
stipulations then, not necessarily measurements of what's being produced.
Correct, it's the regulatory process that they go through, they do their own calculations, their own assessment and background, groundwater levels, lake levels, to help set water quality objectives that protect those beneficial uses. In general, it's to not further degrade the existing water quality.
And
That's
so
different.
the same would be true in terms of the hardness. The water at green spot is not necessarily harder than what's going in the lake.
Again, it's probably tied to groundwater levels, so the hardness in the lake is naturally lower than what's in the groundwater basin.
Because either one's gonna be working with water that came from the plant, that's the same operations. So I'm
Correct.
wondering why it would be harder at green spot.
These are just the objectives, these are not necessarily what we would discharge. This is what we have to meet for regulatory requirements.
Okay, so the targets.
Yeah, but because we have lower recovery, the TDS and hardness will change along with the chlorides and sodium and sulfate. But yeah, these are the limits that we would be permitted to discharging and Barbara would be responsible to meet in order to discharge, but these are not what we're actually getting out of the process. Those would be different numbers, but
Okay,
Yeah, I'll just maybe add to clarify, so these are basically maximum amounts that you could discharge at these two different locations. And they were established based on what the actual water quality was in those water bodies back in the late sixties, early seventies, when the Clean Water Act and the basin plan was originally being developed. And so the goal was to protect existing water quality and to not allow any new discharges that would cause it to degrade. And so the reason they're different is just that in the seventies, they were different. And so this is just reflective of protecting what's already there. And these, the water quality up in Big Bear is very good, which is why we see these levels being lower than elsewhere in California. Is because it started out very good and the regulations require us to keep it very good. And so that is one of the primary drivers of the level of treatment for this process.
And we don't add like TDS or hardness, that's just part of the natural, the natural spring water that we get. So we don't add anything to it. I mean, there is things that are added to the, say, the flushing process. But for the actual water quality, as far as the hardness and the TDS, most of it's different, and you'll see that in the pilot. I think it's in the pilot study, you can actually see what the estimated is for that process. It's better. Much better.
So the shaded standard, was that necessarily developed in the sixties and the green spot was developed later, or are these standards set at the same time based on the same state and federal mandates?
Yeah, generally they were set around the same time when the basin plan was originally put in place. The difference with the lake discharge is the TIN and the total phosphorus numbers, those are really stringent numbers. Those came in, I think it was 2004 timeframe, when the TMDL was established for the lake. for nutrients. And so those were that became more stringent than the original.
And is that because of human contact for recreation and fish habitat, or just a coincidence?
It's more maintaining lake water quality, because it really focuses on the nutrients, right? Controlling algae, controlling water quality, and part of that, yes, is habitat.
Which
it
still would
is-
be recreational contact and,
Yeah, and it really is just in response to, you know, natural and urban runoff, changing over time up here and trying to protect the water quality of the lake. So the regional board decided we needed to be more stringent in order to protect the water quality of the lake.
is ultimately then the idea of the three primary was drop proof the valley, keep the lake full, and keep the water in the valley.
Yeah.
If we're going to put the 500 in green spot, what are you doing with the other 1,710 acre feet?
Yes, so the remainder of the water would really be just status quo. We would continue to treat it to the current levels of treatment and discharge it to Lisbon Valley under your existing permit. We just
Nothing in the lake, all to outfill.
current. Yeah, in the future, you could do something different in that water, but yeah, this green spot alternative, sorry, we didn't clarify that. The
Well,
remainder of the water stays.
It
that.
doesn't require that line to convey water to division anymore because you're not going to do that.
Correct, yeah,
Okay.
so instead
Well,
of that,
If you
convey it.
increase program or project to include water in the lake, then you've got to go back and spend the money for that
Yeah, in the
additional line.
exactly, yeah. In the future, if you were to add any new uses, you would have to construct the conveyance facilities to get it to that location, whether it's the lake, the Van Dusen, or anywhere else.
And the line to convey that water under the current mode is that 8, 12.
It's 12.
Thank you.
Bridget, there's one more thing I want to mention before we get into the discussions. Yeah, so, as I mentioned in the 2004-2005 timeframe, there were lots of hydrogeologic studies done, a pilot program, groundwater modeling. All of the regulations, were considered to make sure that this could meet the regulations. So the one thing that study identified that we need, to just be confirmed event forward is, there's some existing private wells in the area. And the state records really are not very good for those. It just shows that they were drilled at some, so we don't know if they're still being used or what they're being used for. And so that's one thing that needs to be, sort of refreshed, is just the understanding of what wells are out there, what are they being used for, so that the evaluation can confirm that, okay, yes, all of the groundwater regulations would be met, the water quality for those wells would not be impacted. That was kind of an action item from the previous 2005 study that would need to be refreshed this time. So you'll see that on the list of actions. That would be one of the first things that would need to be done for the green spot.
Thanks. Third one, I do have a question. If you were to take the 500 and upscale it to 1,000 acre feet, what would be the additional cost, or even upscale it to the 2,100?
Yeah.
Just a guess, I mean.
I wouldn't guess.
Well, I'm better at guessing. trust me.
Well, I don't want you to guess, but is it 300% more?
To go
Based
from
upon-
500 to 1,000.
Well, I mean, that would be 100%.
Yeah,
I'm just using my simple math, but if you went to the full, say 2,100, would it be 300% more?
not 300% more, no.
Five is represented on the full.
105 is the full, yeah. So that's what we had previously, again, in October, November 2025 dollars. So yeah, it's not 300% more. That 105 is kind of a benchmark for that 2.2 MGD capacity. That 1950 acre feet, so you could use that as a reference point.
Okay, so if we're making a decision to spend this amount to get only 25% of the water. I'm just thinking in the future, if we want to add another 25%. I mean, how much more might that cost us?
Well, if you don't build the building out and the facilities out to be scalable to that, like I mentioned in our assumptions, we built the building just big enough for the 500 acre feet per year. The line green spots, 8-inch size for that capacity, then you'd basically just be duplicating the process. So you're gonna carry the same top of the line item for the treatment cost, pipeline, et cetera, so. Yeah, if you were planning to scale and you knew you were gonna scale, but certainly it'd be cheaper to do that now, just build the process building. Bigger, you get more space for the equipment, make sure you have the right electrical loads, et cetera. But that also has the same commensurate increase in O&M that you have to think about as well.
The EIR put 500 acre capacity for Sand Canyon, 1,000 for green spot. And so your suggestion is that it would need some studying to verify that it can even handle the 500. Should we then be reevaluating even the capacity for Sand Canyon?
No, the historical documents, the 2004, 2005 documents demonstrated that it can handle 500, green spot, can handle 500, it can handle 1,000. It can't handle any more than that. 1,000 really is the max with careful operation. And the only thing that it did not, wasn't able to, state explicitly, had to do with the private wells in the area, because there was some uncertainty as to which ones were still there and what they were being used for. So that's the only aspect of the original green spot investigations that wasn't completely closed out. And so we would need to recheck that now, but no implication for Sand Canyon. Yeah, the Sand Canyon analysis was separate. There are no private wells, I think, in that area that there were thought to be impacted. So yeah, the 500 in green spot, we have a high level of confidence that that is a viable recharge operation, and that the regulations could be done.
One of the reasons that we're not suggesting go to 1,000 is because that required the 6 additional wells. And if you put 6 additional wells, I know CSD is looking into the cost of the well, but they're $1.5 million to $2 million a piece, right? So knowing that, not trying to add that additional capacity over there is the reason being because we didn't want to add the 6 additional wells. That, somewhere between $10 and $12 million is a lot of money to add towards this project, just to get the additional 500 acre feet. We can do 500 acre feet using existing wells. Both DWP and CSD has wells in those areas. They both can extract from that area. There's no additional equipment needed to do that. And so it makes it really cost effective by using 500 acre feet. Again, could we go to 6? Can we go to 650? Quite possible. Without it impacting, without needing the additional 6 wells. It's quite possible, depending again on the groundwater levels. We might get actually more recharge opportunity. Again, we'll have to see how well the aquifer takes the water. And there is testing requirements once you implement a project like this. There's testing requirements to see how well your original estimates are performing. So.
But then you are apparently confident it can handle 500.
500 is a flat, like the hydrogeologist was 100% clear that it can handle 500 without question. And if you go to 1,000 without question, it's just you have to put the additional wells in.
Again, then the opinion would be the current wells could not handle
1,000.
charging of 1,000.
The current wells, based on what the hydrologists, they say, no, we can't handle that. You have to put the additional wells in place.
Are you talking about the DWP and CSD wells?
That's great.
straws, multiple straws in the same cup.
You'd have to put the 6 additional wells in to extract that water to ensure that you don't. There were issues with flooding out some of the houses below this area.
But this does give both the DWP and the CSD access to the water.
It does, it gives them both access to the water, but also, you know, and to serve the customers on this east end, right? That's what it does.
And then talking about wells, I know CSD's had a problem with the PFAS. So would this help their wells with blending of water?
You know, that would be probably a discussion that they'd have to have. It might help them. I'm not sure, but again, it would be that would be a discussion for the hydrogeologist to look at, maybe to see if it's connected to the same aquifer. It was pulling from the same area, and this additional water helps with that blending that they were looking for already.
Right, because are you guys having to do some mixing right now?
That's meant for fluoride.
Not
Deep
PFAS.
wells, deeper rock formation. We don't add fluoride, it naturally occurs. So to meet state standards, Jerry moves shallow wells into the reservoir with the deep well water to neutralize, rather than having to build a plant to remove it. Now, the PFAS, apparently that's not as easily handled. And so, yeah, we're looking at $1 million or more for a plant.
RO system in, like they're putting here,
Yeah.
to remove PFAS. That's the requirement, but I thought that it was gonna be.
I don't know whether, I mean, if you're gonna move it from here to there and blend, you gotta have pipes that can handle it. At the same time, you're providing pipes to put water in people's taps and toilets. So I don't know if that's been looked at. Maybe it would, I don't know.
I would say that it certainly provides more operational flexibility for both agencies, to where if you do have a water quality problem with one set of wells, you know, the water quality of the green spot area is good, and the water quality that would be going in to the basins is excellent. PFAS would be removed to non-detectable levels. And so we wouldn't, you know, I think it would increase the confidence that water quality in the green spot area would be really good. And so it would create more operational flexibility. It may, you know, till there's running, they require more facilities to blend. But I would say, you know, certainly there is some benefit in that way. And I know that DWP already has facilities in place to transfer water. We're gonna use the water in this area where they can transfer it over, you know, to the west side of the system. So I don't know that more detailed studies have been done related to, you know, PFAS specifically, but the same hydrogeologist who's working on this program is working with CSD, and so there's, you know, I think there's some benefits and continuity there to maximize the operational benefits.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely seems like there's more opportunities for both agencies to use this
Yeah, I mean, when you
than
figure,
just the lake.
if you figure it's 500 acre feet, you know, both agencies use about 3,000. It's about, you know, about 17%. Additional water, so it really does benefit the entire valley, but specifically the east end.
I think both agencies could directly access the water using their own facilities, whereas the, you know, their current scope requires kind of a transfer agreement from DWP to CSD. The other thing is, because the groundwater basin is not subject to report judgment, both agencies don't have a specific limit for how much they can use. The water rights aren't distributed. It's really a shared resource that they manage together. And for that reason, I think that the discussion of, you know, which agency gets how much water, the program water equity becomes much more simplified as well. And I think would just be handled in the same way that the groundwater management is handled, which is cooperatively, just ensuring that there's enough for both agencies. So I think that, you know, from Barla's consideration of program water equity, I think would just shift to groundwater basin management. Do our both agencies have access to the water?
I've been asked by people to explain the idea that there's more than one water table.
Hmm.
Is there a universal aquifer throughout the valley, or are there in fact different pools we're pulling from?
Yeah, let's actually go back to look at, there's a slide that kind of shows it. Yeah, on next meeting. It shows, these boundaries, on this map are all, subunits of the bigger valley basin. And so, I've heard it described before as a kind of, like a basin, right, where they are all connected. But there are within these subunits, some areas that are more confined than others. Some of these subunits are more connected to each other, some are more separate. So it's really complex. There's been a lot of, hydrogeology study of the area. So I think the answer to that would depend on which subunits we were talking about. But generally, I'd say, no, it's really not one big bathtub, right? That all has the same water table. These areas are definitely influenced uniquely by, the local runoff that's present there and the amount of wells that are present there. So I think what's happening in Green Spot is absolutely distinct from what's happening, over at Rathbone.
Well, the target was when we had people talk that came before the podium and spoke. What happens if something catastrophic occurs and we contaminate? We are producing water that actually contaminates these aquifers. If we pumped it out here and contaminated this one, that would protect what the city uses, or does it matter? It's eventually going to contaminate all of them.
Okay, that's a good question. And actually the groundwater recharge regulations, I think we explained the groundwater recharge regulations as more certain, but they're not easy, right? They're very, very stringent. And so that is actually one of the things that has to be looked at in order to get a groundwater recharge permit. Is we have to do the groundwater modeling to say, okay, if something went wrong, right? There are lots of monitoring in place of the plant. However, if something went wrong and the water that got put into Green Spot was not suitable for what would be the backup plan? And so you would have to show the regulators, the Division of Drinking Water, what might those impacts be? How widespread might it be? And what would be the backup plan? How would you get water to those residents if something like that were to happen? And so there would have to be a detailed plan put together. I think right now I would say that, they would have to rely on operational flexibility of getting water from other parts of the basins that we do not anticipate being impacted. But that's something that would be looked at as part of that groundwater modeling effort. And the regulators would require a very detailed plan before they would be recharging them.
Which has to be done no matter which system we
Doesn't
choose.
matter. Either location would require the same, is gonna require the same type of permit. Yeah, so, and just note this too, obviously, we already know that at the plant, there are SCADA systems that shut down if we're producing water that is not in compliance with the current permit requirements. It shuts the plant down, and then we keep sending it to the server. So the likelihood, unless, a new regulation, I don't know what, I can't foresee any likelihood of us contaminating the groundwater table. There isn't any, because it would just shut down automatically. So I understand that there were people concerned with that. But this, the water that we're going to produce out of this is extremely,
With our current knowledge, it's fine.
it is more than fine. It's above drinking water standards that we would be putting it back into the ground. So,
Yeah, thank you for emphasizing that, David. The regulations require, we have specific online instrumentation, meaning it's constantly reading or reading at some short intervals and feeding to a SCADA system. We would design it, armed the automatic diversion valves. So to Lane's point about what would have to happen if something did go wrong. The regulators, the designers would already be a step ahead of that, saying, how do we mitigate this pathogen plan? And those are reportable, they're required. John would have to calibrate it a certain amount of times every year. To show the regulators that, to make sure they're operating as intended.
Okay, so shall we move on to the?
Yeah, for the grants.
So the first couple of slides in this section are, again, updates of information that we provided in December. Showing the current grant status. There's been an additional reimbursement from IWM since that time. So the reimbursement amount has increased. Otherwise, no major changes. I guess the other thing I'll highlight is that for STAG, the 2022 STAG grant, PPA, and that one is that final? Is that the final?
That-
Near final.
If you finally got that final agreement.
Yeah, and so we're preparing the first reimbursement request under that grant, so that should come back to us soon. Now, the potential grant impacts, if the board were to decide to make a scope change to pivot, I'll just walk through these. So the state grants through IRWN, the first one is closed out, so no impact there. IRWN, Popcorn Round One, we already have a risk of repayment if the project is not constructed because it is an implementation grant. Now, will they really make you pay it back? We don't know, but in either case, that risk is unchanged. With the current scope or the new scope, that risk is unchanged. The really key thing that we're focusing in on is the Title 16 federal grants, that 18.9 million. We had a discussion with the Title 16 staff a couple of weeks ago, and we got some really good insight on how they would see that. And so there is a risk of losing those funding, depending on how the benefits are packaged, really. So we have a couple more slides in a lot more detail, so we'll talk about that over there. The STAG grant, the 2022 STAG grant that I mentioned that we're near final agreement on, there's a repayment risk on that one because we made sure that the scope of that grant aligned with things that had already been completed. So no risk there. Similar with the $2 million remaining for the next two sets of STAG money. This has not yet been defined. So when we do define that scope, we will make sure that is for things that would not be subject to repayment. So really the focus is on that Title 16. And so what they told us, the reclamation staff regarding Title 16 grant is, so our current scope is to do the full program, right? So 500 acre-feet of water recharge, in this case as a San Canyon, and the lake discharge, and then the associated habitat and recreation benefits. So that total of 2,000-ish acre-feet. That's what the grant agreements are currently based on. Now, if you were to switch, and so, we're calling it phase 1, phase 2, where phase 1 shifted to being groundwater recharge at Green Spot, they actually don't care which location it's at, but, and then to say, well, we're not doing the lake discharge habitat right now, we might do that in the future, that would be a potential future phase 2, and you wouldn't be required to implement anything else in the future. If you were to sort of keep these two things packaged this way, either saying we're doing it all now, or we're gonna do some now and some later, in either of those cases, it would be the same in their eyes. It'd be the same overall total benefits. They didn't really anticipate any impacts to the grant in that case. We still have to go through the process, do the scope change, and they would have the final say. But they were optimistic that everything would stay the same that way. The difference is that the Title 16 program provides a maximum of $30 million of grant funding for a project, lifetime for a project. So if you keep them together, like if you do them all at once, your max is 30. If you do them separately, your max is still 30. And so there's some long-term implications to that. So we'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. That's really much in the system. So. If you were to try to preserve two pots of $30 million, so a max of 30 now, I really should say the 18.9 now and a separate pot of 30 later. You could try to break them apart and say, okay, we're only gonna do 500 acre feet of recharge now. However, if you break them apart, they would have to go back and reevaluate the original grant application and determine if it would have been eligible back then for funding. There is a high risk that they would determine it was not eligible. And so I do not recommend that approach because I think it would risk all of the existing 18.9 that has been awarded to Barba. What that would get you is, the possibility to apply for an additional $30 million in the future. But that's if you were to implement another phase, and if the federal government were to implement Title 16 at that time, which there's no guarantee they make those decisions on an annual basis. So while there is a long-term upside in breaking them apart, potentially, I think the short-term impact would likely be a loss of grant funds. And so the recommendation would be to keep the overall scope in the grant agreement. And so you would have $30 million total grant max for all phases. And so based on the $88.6 million estimate for the total expenditures towards green spot, that 18.9 million that you already have is really right there at the 25%. So we wouldn't probably get any more, but you would be able to keep and use the 18.9 that you already have. And then of the 30 total pod, there would be a maximum of another 11.1 million that you could potentially apply for in the future. Again, you have to apply for it, it's not guaranteed. So there is still, future upside to being able to get some additional grant funding towards future phases for Replenish Bigger if you were to do that. And again, it does not require implementation of any future phases. What they said is, we don't care when you do the things or which ones you do, but the way that you define the scope is what they're going to look at. And so it would be, I think, completely transparent with them that they were going to, if the board decides to move forward with phase one, that's what we do now. And, future phases are TBD, and that would be fine with them, from what they said. So the process would look like, submitting a scope change request. They would have to review the request and then issue a revised agreement. And so it's not 100% certain until they go through the process of reviewing it, having the internal discussions and revising the agreement. But based on our conversation, we have a high level of confidence that shifting the scope would allow you to preserve the 18.9 million if you keep the overall vision for the program intact, which doesn't hurt anything to keep it intact, right? Whether or not you do it now, keeping that vision intact is important for Title 16 grant funding. So before we kind of launch into this final discussion, I guess as part of it, or if there are any other questions on anything presented, happy to take those now. I think this slide kind of lays out the discussion that we have. I think,
I have one question. So we were talking about the building. It only handling 500 acre feet. Is there a world where you can build the building but not buy the equipment for 2,000 acre feet?
Correct, yeah,
You can.
yeah, but that process building is a lot of money per square foot, so it really does, as you start to expand that with more capacity, that will into the cost quite a bit.
Yeah, but and the building itself is modular enough, so that you could.
It's a pre-engineered metal building, so yeah, if you went into it knowing people wanting to provide that flexibility, could structurally design it so you could take off, say, the west wall and expand it out that way.
Oh, okay.
But kind of just the economy of scale thing, so if you were to do that in the future, but you don't leave space in between the process units. That's what I said earlier, you're basically just duplicating the process in a paradigm between which is more expensive to do later.
Right.
And operationally, it's a pain to operate two parallel treatment trains like that. I'm using the same feed and output. But again, we were trying to show what is the alternative with the same product, what benefit battery per year. What's the lower cost in that? That's what this alternative is really showing. So that's why we shortened the building to just accommodate that battery production.
Gotcha. But in theory, you could, like, you did build a big building, but yeah, it's a lot more empty space than that. Yeah. And then just for clarity, just because I'm getting a little confused on that. So the project itself is around $86 million. But then the implementation, no? 88.
88, but it's all right.
Big numbers. And for the implementation costs, there's like 7 million you said already spent.
Yeah, so, yeah, to date, we've spent about 7 million.
Yeah, and so if we were to like remove that, we're looking at one.
If you remove that, you're about 81, that's correct.
Awesome. Yeah. And then with the grants, is it fair to minus the grants from that total or like the?
Yeah, in terms of the local share of that amount.
Yeah.
I think we've been reimbursed about 4.5 million. Is that right?
Yeah.
I think about 4.5 million that we've been reimbursed already. So couldn't exactly say, but 27 million minus, from the 81, but you could do. About, let's just say 22 million minus from the 81 would be total.
Yeah, because none of the federal grants have been reimbursed yet, so that almost 22 million, that is all outstanding that is direct offset to the 81.
So if everything goes to what, like to plan, what would be the total after grant? All that,
57, 58 million, somewhere right there.
somewhere there.
15 million, yeah.
And if this project is moving forward, is there like a marketing plan for residents in the area? Is there outreach or?
Well, I mean, I guess that, I love there has been a marketing plan in the past to reach out to residents and promote the project.
Sure.
We've been kind of in that stop-go mode.
Yeah.
So it's hard to apply for more grants, right? Because there's more grant opportunities out there.
Right.
It's hard to promote the project, hey, we're moving forward when it's kind of in that gray area, whether we are or not. So those are the kind of things that, obviously, if the board got behind this project and said, we're going this direction, then obviously we would go that direction and, we'd see more of an outreach for this direction. And we would apply for more grants and all those things that we hadn't been we're kind of stalled on doing because we don't know where we're headed. We would start to do.
There'd be a budget for it essentially.
There would be a budget for it. There was some budget already for.
It's included in those implementation costs. It's part of what we call program management. It's just overall communication about the program. And I think one of the most important near-term pieces of communication would be around, in particular, the property owners in the area of the green spot recharge. As I mentioned, from a technical perspective, we do need to get more information about the wells that are out there. And so as part of that, you're talking to the property owners, you're talking to the developers. And so it would be important that we provide them with information as part of that conversation so they can understand what information you need, why, and how might that impact me and what's the overall program. So I think it would be important, specifically for that subset of ratepayers to have that information about what's happening in your community. And then, if there's a shift, I think we definitely need to revisit some of the prior communication that we've done as well. And so that's something that would be within the program management contract going forward.
Yeah, for me, that would be a really important part to communicate well to the valley. Where we're going and what it is that we're doing, because it's a new perspective, a new shift.
Yeah.
So we want people to deal with facts, not fiction. So I think it, not just educating the people that are close and around their green spot, like we need to do a really good job of educating everybody. Okay, do we have any more questions at this moment? Okay.
When you talk on page 33, current grant status, 26, 27 million, somewhere up there. That's on the $105 million project. If you reduce it to the 88, you don't get this. Or is that still uncertain?
No, we believe that if you reduce it to the 88 and change the scope, that these grants would remain intact. The 18.9 that is from Title 16 is the limitation there on the amount that you can get is it can be no more than 25% total federal grants. And so even at the 88.6, that actually is right at 25%. So that amount, you could still be eligible for that amount.
But they always hedge their bets, and so when you ask, they say it's likely or unlikely or possible or probable.
Well, yeah, so the staff person that we were talking to, you know, is not the final decision maker necessarily, right? It goes through a whole process at Reclamation. But based on their typical process and his anticipation in their sort of their policy around how they view these grants, his expectation was that the eligibility will be maintained. And then the amount of eligibility is based on 25% of the total cost, which lands you at about that 18.9 million. So we would expect those numbers to stay the same. Stag would not be impacted. IRWM, I think would also not be impacted. And most of IRWM is.
I mean, Beverly wise, based on that 88.6, we're entitled to 21.5 million roughly, okay, which is right in this ballpark of these numbers already. So I don't foresee having to change anything far as the amount of the amount of grant money we could get for, say, this phase one. It's if we decide to go to phase two at a later date, then there's another 11.1 million that would be eligible that we could apply for. If we wanted to go to phase two and go to Van Dusen or go to the lake or go someplace else with the additional water.
Well, in the past, you have described the qualifiers for these grants, things like recreation, aesthetics, wildlife, and all that. Well, if we're not going to put anything in the lake, you start losing all those qualifiers.
Right, and that's why we were suggesting to not change the actual total scope. We just label it as phase one and phase two, keeping phase two as an option for us in the future. We don't lose those qualifiers and then we don't get reevaluated, that the grant itself doesn't get reevaluated for its
Theory is
eligibility.
that that's acceptable to the powers that be.
Yeah, and we've had those conversations already, and we're quite, you know, he was quite encouraging that, hey, just put it phase one and phase two and keep the current scope. And then you won't lose your grants.
Right, that's what Lane was talking about on page 37, where she said,
Right.
keep overall vision intact.
Yeah, and that includes
Don't
the benefits, and it's okay from your perspective to continue to claim those benefits, even if you don't intend to do that part of the project right now, that's fine. It's not disingenuous, it's not misleading. It's just that it limits you to the $130 million pot. And so as long as you understand that, they understand that, it could be, that would be acceptable to them.
And also, I think to Rick's point earlier, it's not an $88 million project because we've already spent that money and we need to communicate that well.
Yeah,
If you look at 80, now I hear the reason for the 88,
Well,
that percentage.
it's eligible for a grant rate.
So I understand that. Should have said that from the start.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so I get that part of it. The true bill would be much less.
Right.
So then we're talking to 56 million approximately with this grant.
Okay, are there any more board comments at this time? Because if not, I'll open it up to public comment.
So,
this slide.
Oh, sorry. Oh, we were, okay, sorry, missed that. I'd already read that slide, so I had already moved on.
Yeah, and you can decide what's happening to that, but we did, just so that, hopefully we can get, some clarity moving forward, right? And so the first question here, I think most of you answered in the survey that staff had done is, does the board want to continue pursuing groundwater recharge for the valley? We heard that there was support for that, so if there are any other comments, anything you guys want to share around that, we just want to space for that.
I mean, as a board, I think these questions are important and we need to take a long, hard look at this. Because 4 of us that filled out the survey said we want to pursue a groundwater recharge project. And I'm feeling pretty good about question number 2, achieving the outcome. Does this help achieve the outcome the board is looking for? Is that our other thing that we've been messing around with here for a couple of years wasn't going anywhere. So this is a new vision.
And it does meet the objective of the mission for this agency, the objective of trying to get groundwater recharge, reusing this water, putting that back, putting it back, keeping it in our valley. I mean, there's just a lot of little things that it does. This specific project, this alternative that we're presenting, does achieve, right? It does achieve groundwater recharge, it does achieve groundwater sustainability in our valley, right? I mean, we already looked at 500 acre feet is probably like a 50-year, extends our 50-year lifespan as far as being, keeping the groundwater sustainability and the safe yield of our valley, right? It does achieve that for the next 50 years. So that's important. Obviously, doing a project that's more cost effective is important, right? I think that's what this project does. It's more cost effective than the lake alternative. I think there's just a lot of, right, from every perspective, this project meets that, as far as green spot.
And really a big sticking point too before was there was an additional cost to the DWP agency to do the Sand Canyon pipe. There was going to be additional cost to CSD. There's going to be even more additional cost when MWD wanted that extra pipe put in Baker Pond. So there's no additional cost, from my understanding, to the agencies.
Yeah, this really is, all this cost is all borne on Barwa's rate structure, right? It's very similar to the rate structure that we presented in the past for this project, right? We've already implemented much of the rate structure already. So it really does fit all of those, all of the original bill of the original project.
Right, because we're in year 4. Right?
I think.
Is it year 4 of the rate
I think
structure?
I think we're in year 4 of the rate structure. I
We're
think,
entering
actually, I think we delayed 1 year, right? We did delay 1 year. We didn't put an increase in, so if there would be 3 more years of 18% that starting with this year.
So the ratepayers have been paying for it,
They have been paying for it, so we're.
and we're not giving them what they paid for.
Well, I mean, that's our.
At this
intention.
moment.
At this moment, we're trying to give them.
If you've already spent money on this project, you are in effect, that's why the money was supposed to be collected, is you'd have something to work with.
That's right.
So that's,
We're doing our job.
yes. Then at least 2, if not 3 years, I've been hearing the state's gonna come down and we won't be allowed to have the outfall line anymore. So that concerns me in that both the currently proposed, I'll call it the lake project, required that outfall line in case of wet years or a need to divert water somewhere because we didn't have capacity. Well, you're still going to need that outfall line in this one.
Yes,
In fact, it sounds like more so.
yes,
And yet we're saying, one, we're not sure it's usable condition wise. 50-year-old pipe that has not been thoroughly examined.
so the 50-year-old pipe that hasn't been examined, we are going through the process of evaluating that line. We know that, just because something is given a 50-year lifespan doesn't mean we're going to need to replace it all. We don't
Right.
know that, right? We can't say that, and I wouldn't want to say that, right? But we will evaluate the line. There are areas of the line where it makes a turn or takes a large elevation change. That we're going to look at those specific areas to evaluate what the pipe conditions are. So that way we can give you an honest evaluation of the pipe condition. I would not expect at this moment, and again, I think it might change until we're done with the evaluation. I'm not expecting to have to replace the entire line. I'm expecting to do spot repairs, those kind of things. Someday is the entire line gonna have to be replaced? Sure it is. We just don't know when, and we're gonna, through this evaluation, we'll get that estimate done, and we'll let you know when we anticipate having to replace that whole line, so we can put it in our capital project, our capital plan, for future use. As far as when the regional board down in Lucerne are going to change the regulations on us, we don't know. We don't know when that is. I expect it in the next 10 years. And then we'll have to pivot at that point. They'll give us time. They'll typically, I think it's around 5 years typically for implementation of a change in as far as water quality that they would need down there. And then we'll have to pivot at that point, and whatever we need to do, whether it's tertiary or something to that level, we'll make those adjustments at that point. Does that answer your question?
I'm just getting at the fact that there are still unknowns. And so it's going to have to adapt to whatever equipment is usable, whatever program is going to take effect. And I would disagree with the aspect of this isn't really 88 million. To get to this project's completion, or at least this phase, if you want to call it that, this money had to be spent. And so I would see some people who will say, well, if you claim it's only 58, now you are misleading, that in fact, it was 88 million spent.
So I think when Mr. Herrick was referring to the 58, $59 million range that we're talking about, he's talking about, less the grants, right? That's what he's talking about, right? So he's saying, okay, well, what it's gonna cost us, and you can speak for yourself, I'm sure, but I'm just saying that's what he's saying, is like, that's the cost of this at this point to shift now to that project. That's the cost.
But we've also told people that there are other sources we might be able to get money from.
Right.
Okay, and so as long as we keep saying that, I would say that is less than transparent, or perhaps misleading to say, oh, well, we'll get somebody else to contribute money. Maybe Fish and Game will give us some money.
Well,
That chance.
and I just want to be entirely clear.
Yeah.
Right? Let's just be entirely clear. There is still $59 million to the cost of this project is still $59 million to overcome at this moment.
To finance.
To finance, to find a home for whatever we decide to do, whatever the board decides to do moving forward. That is true. I cannot, in good faith, keep going after grants, and I haven't been able to go after grants because I don't have, frankly, the confidence that the board was moving forward in a direction towards construction.
I don't wanna take money from other people, other agencies in the valley, other agencies in the state, right? If I'm not genuinely saying we're moving forward to construction, it's not fair, it's not right. And that's not who we are as a valley to do that kind of stuff. So we want to apply for more grants, but we clearly need direction from the board. If this is the way you wanna go, then we should move in this direction. And you should give us direction to move forward, to go forward with Green Spot, move forward with this project and get it done. We just need, we can't have this ambiguity at this point. And then I promise you, we will go after grants. I can't promise you a grant, but we will go after grants, we will go after other opportunities, we will go after financing for this project. You know, we need the Whitfield loan to move forward. We need this stuff to move forward, but we need board direction. We're kind of at that point. We don't want to spend good money after bad. We want to move forward in the right direction, doing the right things.
And I'm coming from the observation that in the meantime, when you have been trying to get more money, nobody has come forward forcing money on us.
Haven't
They
you
don't,
stopped
we
asking for
applied
money?
for one grant at Google. We have not moved forward with any other grants because, again, I'm not going to be disingenuous to the other agencies in the state that we're moving forward with this project when they can clearly see, and they do, they listen to our minutes, they listen to our meetings, and they can see that our board is divided on this project. I can't do it. I can't do it, and they won't give us grants. They see those.
It would be silly for
Right,
him to put out more work when we're being ambiguous about it. It would be silly to ask for money when we're a disorganized mess right now.
and it's $25,000 to $50,000 to apply for a grant.
Right.
Right? Right, I do not, I would not, and it's not. It would not be in the interest of our agency for me to say, yeah, let's go after that grant. And spend $25,000 to $50,000 to go after a grant. When I'm not sure we have a consistent message from our board to move forward with a project. It's not the right thing. It's not fiscally responsible, and that's the intent, right, of your staff, is to be fiscally responsible.
But I'm hearing from people in the public. And Rick made the comment about not wanting misinformation, and there's a lot of it out there. I'm still hearing people think that this project, whichever aspect we go for, is going to drought-proof the valley, keep the lake full, and it's like, we've heard from our consultant that, that's not a reasonable expectation. But that, in terms of public information, I can still go to Replenish Big Bear, and it doesn't say in there that that's not true anymore. Our website, I know the minutes at one point did reflect that was said. It can't do that. But the public is still out there misinformed to the extent that there's more money coming and it's going to do all these wonderful things that it can't.
Again, all I can do is clarify 100%, right? I don't want many misinformation out there, right? I don't want to be ambiguous. I want to tell you exactly what the project's gonna do and what it's not gonna do, right? It was never intended to fill the lake, right? The project never filled the lake. It added, if we went there, it added roughly around 4.5 inches per year to the lake level. That's it. That's what it did, right? It never was intended to fill the lake. That was never the intention, but as far as drought proof the valley, it doesn't drought proof. Again, you can't anticipate growth patterns and all that kind of stuff. All we can do is do our very, very best to present the information that we have from the water purveyors up here on what they expect, the expectations of growth for this valley. It's like 0.5% a year. Based on those projections, all we can say is that
the valley overall, this will give us, the 500 acre-feet will give us enough water in this valley, probably for the next about 50 years, again, given the current growth expectations that the urban water master plan presents. That's what they expect it to do. That's what all the water purveyors up here are expecting to do. So to be perfectly clear, that is what we can expect. 17% of our annual usage up here, roughly. So, you know, we know that is, we know that there is great value in adding 17% of available yield for us in the future. We're doing a great job with water conservation, right? We know that it is limited because we do not have landscape up here. We're limited and we've done a great job. I think the valley overall has done a great job on limiting the amount of doing water conservation up here. New toilets, taking out grass, they've done all these things. There were grants given to GWP and CSD to do those kind of things, and that has happened. We've done a great job in doing that. But we are at that limit, right? There is not that much landscape up here. So I would not expect any other available water conservation techniques that I can see, that I think the water purveyors from talking to Reggie and Glenn, I don't think we see any new sources of water conservation in the foreseeable future up here. But I think we're trying to be as transparent as possible, and we're at that point. We're at a tipping point now with this project moving forward, and what we can stand behind and represent to the board and to the valley is this is our best project that we can present to you, and it has the best benefit for our entire valley is the Green Spot project.
I think we can all agree that this valley does suffer from misinformation. It really terribly, but I mean, Andrew brought it up. Trying to, get good information out there. We need to go on a campaign of getting good information out there. I mean, when I ran for re-election 18 months ago, I literally went to every single door in my district and talked to every single person about Replenish Big Bear. And so I feel like the people that I talk to, I don't get a lot of people calling me up and saying, hey, I heard this, because they feel informed.
But you did say at the time, you were surprised at the number of people who had the wrong story.
Right, but I'm not just gonna sit back and continue to let that happen.
Right.
I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna educate people. Don't just let it happen.
What I am hearing at this point is that this is great for the valley. But I would have to say, please remember, people have made just disparaging comments about the Hicks at the East End, and that we don't understand, and that the city knows better than we do. I would look at who has built a big hotel recently, is building another currently by Walgreens, and has another one scheduled for Snow Summit. Those rooms will yield water, but they will generate TOT for the city. They will encourage sales tax for the city. CSD does not get any TOT. We do not get any sales tax. We don't get any fractional rates of gasoline. So to say that it's a wonder for the entire valley, I'd have to say, looking at the benefits that it gives to the East End, to the CSD, are not the same as the benefit to the city of Big Bear Lake.
But if the water, excuse me, if the water is accessible to each side at an equitable 50-50, call it whatever you want, I can understand how you might have felt like that if the water was going into the lake. But if you have, you're just as accessible CSD end as the DWP end is to the water. So what, we run out of water down there at the other end then, because you're talking about our hotels that we're putting in. You're still, we're not siphoning out more water on that end. It's a 50-50, right? It's
I mean, the valley,
the green
water-
spot project.
Right, the green spot
Is-
project itself, right? You have the availability to come up with any proportion share you so choose. But the bottom line is, we as Borough, and put your Borough hat on now,
Yes.
right? Here's your Borough hat. We're gonna discharge 500 acre feet into an aquifer. That's it. That's your Borough hat. After that, it is up to DWP and CSD's the water purveyors to decide on extraction. They don't have adjudicated rights. You don't have, oh, I gotta do this 500, I gotta do 1,000. They don't have that. The two agencies work together well. As surprising as that sounds, but the two water purveyors work together as well. And they can figure out how much they want to extract each from each end. They can do that. They're very well suited for that. We don't have to, the JPA does specify how much water percentages, we can get to the percentages, we can do all that. But as a Borough board, it's not really like a thing for us. We're gonna discharge 500 acre feet that can be used up here in the valley by both agencies, and the two general managers from both agencies can figure out what percentages do they need to take to balance their aquifer in their end. And that's perfectly fine. We're gonna continue to put 500 acre feet, and we're gonna work with them on to make sure that we're not affecting groundwater tables, and we're gonna do all the water quality things. They're gonna work with us.
And past presentations like this specified 2/3 of the water in the valley was being pumped by the DWP.
And I can't,
1/3 to the
I can't
CFA.
live in the past, I'm gonna live in the future now. We're
Okay,
gonna move forward.
I
We're
did
gonna move
not
forward.
see anywhere in this presentation that said 50-50.
It does not, because again, put your Borough hat on. That's irrelevant to us. Unless this board wants to take a position on it. It is irrelevant to us which purveyor takes which amount. The two GMs can work those details out. That's irrelevant to us. We're gonna put 500 acre feet in, and the two water purveyors can work those details out.
And I mean, DWP has wells out there at
Yes.
Green Spot and.
They have green spot wells, the CSD has green, wells out there. Those two, they can figure it out.
Yes.
And I have all the confidence in the world of the two GMs, because I've met with them both, and we've met collectively on this in the past. I have all the confidence in the world, the two of them could settle it out on how they're gonna divvy up the water, or if they're gonna even divvy up the water, like. Again, there's no adjudicated rights, but there's no reason for them to sit there and go, I'm gonna take 250 of this 500 acre. We're putting it in the ground, with groundwater sustainability, we're benefiting the valley. That's the job of this board.
I'll just add that my comment regarding the program water equity, was that I think that the green spot, like David was saying, it's no longer, Borough, deciding, right, who's gonna count much. I think it would go into the forum of the GSA, the Groundwater Sustainability Agency, where that shared resource is managed cooperatively. And if there, if the parties to the GSA wanted to have an agreement that specified who could pump how much from which subunit, that is something that the GSA could do. Right now, there are no, restrictions like that. It's been managed cooperatively, very successfully. But I think that would be the forum. I think the GSA would become the forum, for the cooperative management of, this is the water source, as well as, throughout the valley, because each agency has wells and multiple subunits. And so, that agency is worried about all of the subunits collectively, and the ability to transfer funding from one to another, depending on how much water is available. So, I think that still could be an important issue, and I think that rather than borrow board being the forum for that, I think it's kind of geez.
You know, I think one of the things that I would suggest, and just like I said in the beginning, like to pivot this direction. I really need the board's support to do that. I'd love the entire board's support on doing that. But to make this project constructible. To make this project so I can go out and get, you know, loans and grants. I really need the board support to do that. I can't, this, you know, the 3-2 aspect doesn't work anymore. Can we get things done? Sure. But is it the right thing to do? So. I think this is the right time to pivot to this direction before we spend any more money going in a different direction. This is the project, I think, that makes sense for the entire valley, and I really, you know, going forward. We really would need to pivot now and get this board, the board support, to move forward with that piece.
I mean, and as I've said before, and you've heard me say it before, living up here is fragile. And I have 8 grandkids up here that aren't going anywhere. So what I'm deciding right now, you know, affects them down the road.
So I guess to answer that quick, Greensboro, can I get a, you know, if you want to vote, however you want to do
We should
it?
take public comment.
Yeah.
Okay,
So if we move on.
yeah,
Okay,
Joyce? The podium is back here today.
Is there a limit?
Yeah, you still have 3 minutes.
Okay, so the reality of the situation is Big Bear East and can't afford this project. There is no way forward with this project, we can't continue to beat the citizens. Big Bear Lake wants development, and at the end of Garston is where your water goes. You could put in your own plan and put water in Big Bear Lake. And another thing is, Big Bear East End, we're having problems trying to pay for our fire department, which is more important to us than Barba spending all our money. And I have an idea that maybe we can put in some water reservoirs for the fire department. So rather than it taking the water out of Big Bear Lake during a fire, we can create a Baldwin reservoir where they take the water for fire. Because it's sewer water and it would be great. Also, who's the one that's decided we can't have beach fields? And I'm wondering about these regulations that we're being imposed upon that's creating this whole situation, because according to the Chevron Act, these regulations aren't even valid. And it's gonna come down to the fact that we have rights. We wanna be sovereign here. And I do believe beach fields would be a better route. And also Greenpoint, Green Spot is next to residential houses out there. And I don't understand why you can't go out farther. So Big Bear City and a lot of the East End said, no, we don't want to pay for any more of this project. Supreme Court determined Chevron Act that these regulations aren't legal and have no authority over our district. The state of California is going against federal law, and we choose to keep our water and not pay for your pipelines. No more pipelines. East End does not want to pay for your pipelines, and the project, as I was told by an engineer, is just ridiculous with all the regulations. And it's not going to happen anyway. And if you guys continue to push this project on the East End, we're going to have to break this GPA agreement, because we can't afford you. We can't afford your loans. And you're continuing to push it on us with our money, without our consent. I have continued to express concerns that a pending lawsuit is coming that the East End is being railroaded. Fire towers with the wastewater is something our community can actually use, but the cost of spending without the CST's consent. CST, those are our wells. You can't have them. You're not the water department. You have no jurisdiction to come into our CST and take any control over our wells. So back off.
thank you.
I thought I had a buzzer.
Daniel?
This is BS. And Larry, you know what that stands for? The whole thing is Big Bear Lake is gonna do huge developments. There's hotels going in. 60 rooms there, or 65 rooms at Moon Ridge. There's gonna be 80 or some right at Switzerland on the property. Big Bear Lake's trying to do the 19 acres. Yeah, there's gonna be some little park, but there's gonna be hotels and restaurants, and I'll tell you who it is. It's Altura and KSL, Capital Partners, Henry Crown and Associates, KKR. Companies that are 20, 30 billion dollar companies. You don't think they're not wagging the tail here of this valley? There's gonna be huge projects. There's gonna be hundreds, maybe 1,000 rooms between the bathrooms and the restaurants. Doing that 19-acre project where they're gonna be kicking people out, where they already put a attorney backup fees of $2 million. Big Bear Lake alone spent 80,000, over 80,000 last month. You don't think they're the tail that wags the dog, and that Altura is not the tail that's wagging the whole valley? They don't give a shit about the east side. You guys, you don't have any. What are you gonna have? A few more houses in over the next 10 years? No, it's all gonna go over there. They're gonna have thousands of toilets. And they're all gonna be coming here. You know, and I'm sorry, grant money is still our money. It's still the citizens' money. Just because you think it's free money, we're paying for it. And hope to God Trump and the administration starts carrying some of these projects of non-ops like Visit Big Bear, getting millions of dollars from TBIDs. That's our tax money. It's not yours, it's our tax money. No, I don't understand it. How dare you? How dare you just think you can just tax this to death? You know, you have all this environmental crap like the 2050 project, which is nothing but DEI, wokeness, and robbing the people here. It's all a big cabal on getting this environmental crap. You know, it's nonsense. You know, they're using it, and California is going down the toilet. And I'm hoping they go into foreclosure or receivership. Because you know what? It's getting to the
Thank you,
point.
Dan.
Of course, it's time, because now you cut it down. You guys speak for hours and you only let us speak a few minutes. That's bull. Was your whole 3 people speaking?
I agree with that.
John Saunders.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks to you.
Unless I got to.
Well, good morning. Trying to use the microphone a bit better here. I don't know if you realize it, but back in the early 80s, I was on the board of directors of the MWD. And a guy named Howard Hopper and myself came up with this Replenish Big Bear program. And we've been working on it and begging for it ever since. And I want to let you know how much I personally, Howard is long gone, but I, as the instigator of this whole thing, appreciate what you're still doing. You're still working on it. I love the idea that you've gotten away from putting the water directly in the lake and putting it in the groundwater. That's the answer to that's what we planned on doing in the first place, was we did groundwater recharge studies in all the canyons, in Deer Canyon, Sand Canyon, all the canyons up there. And we came up, spent a lot of money, I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars to do these studies. And they're still available at the MWD. I don't know if you've gotten use of them. But we started out with putting up, of course, it started off, we've had it starting off in phases.
where we would take water out. The first water we treated the third stage, we put into the stickleback ponds. And then we go on up from the stickleback pond. That would save the DWP a lot of money. They pump a lot of water into that thing every year for stickleback. And while I'm here, I'm concerned about the stickleback ponds because the DWP wants to put in a solar project right in the middle of all of it, and that shouldn't happen. You guys are kind of responsible for that project there, so it would be good if you took into consideration also that solar project that they want to put it over the stickleback ponds could be put right here and incorporated into what you guys do here already. And it wouldn't have any impact on the community anymore than it's already happened. Anyway, I wanted to congratulate you all for still working on this project after all these years. I know it hasn't happened yet, but one of the last things in the world that I want to see happen is that this project goes to fruition and it gets done eventually. Thank you very much.
Thank
You're
you.
doing a great job. Keep it up.
All right, so what? Back to David.
Okay, so I guess we should figure out how you want to do this, but I would like board direction on this green spot alternative and moving forward with that. So I would really like direction on that. And it's up to the board to take a vote, however you want to do it to make that happen. I would propose that we should do something to make that happen.
I hear, is there a chance where I can hear more from CSD on the position? I don't fully understand. The position. Or before we vote.
It's a good question, because I don't really fully understand based on what we were talking about today, this new version.
Yeah, I mean, I understood what you were saying, Larry, before, but I just, in terms of green spot, I don't know that.
Even if it's only heavy emphasis, only 58 million. That's still a very expensive price tag for 500 acre feet of water, of which we are guaranteed no percentage because that hasn't been worked out. I'm not saying we're being prohibited, I'm just saying that has not been worked out. In fact, when we brought the issue of the apportionment before, it was flatly rejected to even discuss the issue. So that leaves me a little concerned. And as I say, it's still $58 million over the next 30 years that we're going to burden the people in order to produce water for hotel rooms.
I'm sorry, I cannot agree with that statement at all. That is, you're taking it and that is patently false.
Several of your statements are false.
Go ahead, Ben, tell me what's false.
Well, first off,
So much of it. How about all of them?
I mean, truthfully, I've been talking with David about this project, I think since December. And I honestly thought that you guys were gonna see the value in it, because it's not going in the lake, it's not evaporating. It's, you're not gonna have to put in millions of dollars to pipe water to where you want it. DWP is not gonna have to put in millions of dollars to pipe it where they want it. The wells are right there. I mean, it makes so much sense to me.
Well, I just let you know, I think everyone pretty much knows how I feel, and I'm not gonna change my mind. And I just feel like the whole thing is all jumbled up, and there's too much different things that are gonna happen or not happen. And I don't want to have all these people in the valley, but especially, the people who can't afford any more. And I know it may not be much for us or some people, but for some people it is a lot. And I think we already said from the start, we weren't interested in this, and yet we keep going on and on. And it's like, and some people sit there and they say holler about us and all that. I just have to say, about, I don't know, 5, 6 months ago, I was asked to go to a, I don't know what the heck they call this. Well, it all the people in town who have businesses and stuff, and you have their meetings once in a while.
Service group,
What is it?
service group,
No,
chamber.
chamber, yeah, the chamber, well, something like the chamber. And anyway, so I got up there and I had to say to my, to make sure that I didn't get sued, in my opinion, or this is what I think. And out of the 60 people that were there, I think only like 10 of them tops even knew about this whole project. And once I started throwing some numbers out, I wasn't slamming, I was just giving actual factual numbers. They just can't believe the price of this. And Lane, it's like the 2 times that you gave us presentations, Larry asked you, once was here, once was a CSD, will this fill the lake up? Because this is what everybody thinks is gonna happen. And you took you a while, and you finally said no. And it's like, I think most people think it's gonna fill the lake up, and I even called MWD, and I Googled it on how much evaporation and loss there is foot wise, and they were both almost identical. So, okay, Google, maybe it's like you can't trust them, but I called MWD and I got the person there, and they said almost the exact same thing. And I don't think that this thing at 4 inches in a year filling up is ever gonna do any good. And I understand there was some good stuff here. And I gotta tell you, 45 years ago, we bought a cabin, and the wife and I were looking and saying, why don't they actually have a replenish thing? Well, no, it wasn't replenished, whatever it was called, recycled. And it's like, and it kept going on, no. So at this point, I'm just gonna still continue to say no, because most people either don't even know about it or don't like it. And a couple of car shows, which obviously I'm into cars, I can't believe how many people who, nobody ever asked me questions about being a director. All these people are going up, Johnny, you guys really gonna do this? It's like, it's got a lot of money, this and that. It's like, I said, I don't know, I have to see what happens. And as far as I'm concerned, we don't need to continue this thing at all. That's all I'm saying.
Please,
He clapped, you didn't stop him. You're biased, I'm telling you, you're biased. I'm
okay,
covered of it.
whatever. John, it's just really a shame that, like, I feel like you haven't even listened to anything we've talked about today. Because today is totally different than what we've talked about for the last couple of years. This is like something totally new, like
Well, this
a
is
pivot.
my opinion, and this is God's statement.
We discussed this before. And as I said, even if I disagree with people's findings or their comments, I will listen in the hopes that they may have something to say which suggests a better outcome, a less expensive outcome. I will agree that this is a better alternative. It is an alternative which is better than the initial project. Perfect. However, it's still at least 58 million. We have doubled people's borrow fees. And yet, if I rent out an extra house, short-term, long-term, whatever, I can claim those expenses on my taxes. As a homeowner, I can't do that. And we've heard an elderly lady, I'll be careful how I put that, who came up and said, I can't afford this. I represent people of similar age who can't afford this. They don't want us to do this. Whereas we have the other side, such as the Board of Realtors, who gets up and says, this is essential for the valley. If you don't do this, we won't be able to sell property. Okay, I'm listening to both sides. But I look at what we've done, and yes, some people are upset that I even agreed to the increase in fees, but I told them, in order to do the studies to progress at all, we have to have money, which our initial budget did not account for. So we weren't collecting money to do that. I understand that. And so that's what I've had to say. We increased to do studies, to do the pilot program, to do consultants, etc. Now, in theory, yes, we're going to owe some money back. Maybe. That's unfortunately what I get out of the results. The return on investment. Yes, you want me to put my Barwa hat on. Well, I'm on Barwa because I represent the people of the CSD. So I have to look at how this impacts them too. And that's why I come from this position. That's a lot of money for water that we don't currently need. And even today's chart, in the past, the convergence of growth versus water reduction would blast into each other in 2069. Today's chart doesn't say that. It gives us a few more years. And I realize these charts are projections. You don't know for sure. We just went through 2 very wet years from Snowmageddon and the following winter, and yet we're being told water is going to become shorter over time. Okay. You can't project what's going to happen 20 years from now. But what I can see is if we grow at the rate the county projects, which is how we have to base our water and our sewer works for the CSD, we have the capacity now to meet those needs. So to say that we must go out and spend $58 million to acquire 500 more acre feet, that to me is not supportive of it. We've been told over time, we must change the plant to go from secondary, tertiary to quaternary, because we aren't going to be able to use the outfall line anymore. And yet we are proposing something that does need the outfall line. I think I told you about Steve Folks came here when we were asking for public input. Steve was the first MWD manager. When this was proposed about 1977, about the outfall line, he was thoroughly against it, saying that it was like pulling the plug on a bathtub, and we'd be letting 2,000 acre feet of water a year to the desert. Well, as it turns out, we are now at 2210, so it's more than he projected. And so he was here to say he was in favor of recharge, but he was not aware of how many things had not been resolved here. And we still have a lot of things that we're juggling in the air. I'm not faulting you for not being able to give us concrete answers. I'm just saying we don't have concrete answers. And to say that this is normal for a government project to move forward, not knowing how much it's going to cost. My father was in construction for 50 years, my grandfather. They both built commercial and government projects. My grandfather worked for the 3rd largest construction company in the world. He actually built projects for the Shah of Iran. So to say, in my experience, seeing what they were doing, I did not ever see them go forward without knowing how much things were going to cost, because they couldn't just tack on money. Governments weren't going to just write you a blank check. That's why I have asked again and again, can we nail these numbers down?
Larry, you're passing your 3-minute time.
Okay.
Make a motion, but maybe it's a little unusual. A motion would be for us to take a individual vocal vote, going member by member, where they would like to move forward with this particular project, which has been proposed, so we can get a little clearer focus for staff. That's my motion.
I would second that.
Vice Chair Walsh,
Can you restate the motion?
Yeah, the motion is to move forward with the green spot recharge project. Director,
No.
Director Russo,
No,
Chair Segovia,
Yes,
Director Sauer,
Yes.
and Director Herrick.
Yes. Okay, I have a question I need to ask. Majority wants to move forward with it. We still are up against a Wi-Fi alone issue. It would basically block it in, much like a filibuster method, where a minority could block this moving forward. With that said, the majority wants to move forward. Do we move forward systematically at this point? Because I think it makes sense for us to not throw away $6 million or $5 million, whatever that number is. It makes sense not to throw the potential of the $18 million away at this particular time until we get some more information about this particular project here. And I'm a little surprised, because I think many of us who are supporting this are surprised, because the water stays in the east end of the valley. It's being paid for at least half, if not more, by the residents and the second homeowners and the businesses of the city of Big Bear Lake. And so it seemed very equitable, and that's the reason why I wanted to bring this back, and why I suggested, made a motion for us to have this meeting in the first place, was to talk about equity. And this is the second time we've had an opportunity to talk about equity. And so apparently equity is not the answer. Don't ask me why, I don't understand it. So it seems like we should move forward with the vote that was taken. We know we have a roadblock still ahead of us. But I think that that's the wisest thing to do.
And that's obviously with the vote, now we're pivoting to design the green spot project itself. So that's what we'll move forward with, the design of the green spot. We do have a stumbling block that you know, with funding in the future, but with the majority vote of the board, we'll pivot to that. And then see as this project progresses and we refine the cost estimates. Maybe the rest of the board will see those refined cost estimates as we get more certainty. Maybe the balance of the board will say, okay, now I understand, you know, these are refined numbers. This is what it's gonna cost us. Maybe they'll feel more comfortable about moving forward at that point. But again, we will be at the end of the design. That'll basically take us to a point where you have to get a vote to move forward with financing the project going forward, or the project doesn't move out to bid and so forth. So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarity. The board could consider an equity position. Right now, on average, the city pays about 52% of the bill. And CSD pays about 48% of the bill. That's currently where it's at. And the other 4% is made up by the county. And that's the way currently the numbers are based on flow to our plant. The board could consider doing an equity, just having an equity discussion based on that is the basis of the way the JPA is set up, is to do it based on the percent of flow that comes to our agency. It's up to the board to have that discussion. We don't need to have it right now. We can continue to do the design and then we can worry about that equity. Because apparently that is really not the crux of what the concerns are. It's really the cost of the project, and we'll refine those costs as we move forward in the design.
I mean, I agree. I feel like it's not equity.
No, apparently not.
So That's the board direction. We do have scheduled, to go into closed session for, another discussion, real property discussion. We can go do that if the board would like to have that discussion. Then,
Yeah.
Okay. Let me do some housekeeping business. So the governing board will convene to close session or a conference with real property negotiators pursuant to government code section 54956.8. Property address 2190 State Lane. We will convene to close session at 11:35 and then we will come out when we're done. Okay,
Yeah, I think
I'd like to reconvene this meeting from closed session at 12:01 and I will turn it over to our attorney. Ward.
Madam Chair, there's nothing, no reportable action to report out of closed session.
Thank you. And we will convene this meeting at 12:02.
Perfect.
Meeting adjourned, yes.
Okay, great.